Hello, I'm Sue Swinand. We're happy to have you with us again for another edition of Arts and Ideas. Today we're privileged to be in the studio of Terri Priest here in Worcester. And Terri has been a long-standing figure in the art community and really a backbone of the art community. She's exhibited widely and her works are included in many important collections throughout the world. Terri, thank you for having us.
Thank you for selecting me as one of your interviewees.
Well, you're one of the people I thought about interviewing because, as Leon Nygrosh once said, I think of you as the high priestess of art in Worcester. And that was in one of his reviews at one point, and I think that's true. And it's probably because you have such a broad background in this community, and you've worn so many hats.
I have.
Over the years, as well as being a practicing fine artist. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, and were you born in this area?
I was born in Worcester, Mass. I was born and raised for the first year of my life in a bureau drawer on Waite Street, which is off of Shrewsbury Street, because my mother was a native from Lebanon. My father was born in Buffalo, New York, but when he was a young man, he was betrothed to my mother, which was typical of the Middle Eastern cultural traditions. And he went to Lebanon, courted my mother, married her, and brought her back. So, then we lived on Millbury Street. Millbury Street was a very multicultural, more multicultural than New York City, because within the small 8 or 10 blocks, there were Swedes, there were Polish, Lithuanian, French, Irish, Armenian, Jewish, I mean, you name it.
So it was a world culture situation.
It really was, and we had to learn how to live amongst all these various cultural families.
And your father, I remember you saying that your father was very supportive of you becoming an artist.
That's right. He was, because he insisted, and my father was, every Lebanese family, the eldest son would be given the records of his previous generation. And my father followed his ancestors all the way to the 14th century, where one member was an illuminator of manuscripts.
One of my favorite art forms.
Right. So he said he wasn't at all surprised that I was displaying some artistic characteristics. And of course, my very first recollection of art was looking at Prince Valiant and wanting to do a Prince Valiant type character.
From the newspaper?
From the newspaper on Sunday morning.
I can remember copying things on those white papers that used to come in the stockings packages, because that was the only white paper without lines you could get. You know?
Absolutely.
But I remember drawing on those as a child. And,
So, and then from there, of course, you know, it was elementary school, and there was no real seriousness about art, but age 14, which was right before I got out of elementary school, I did a visit to the Worcester Art Museum. And lo and behold, I really saw art for what it was.
And it knocked you over and grabbed you.
Oh, not only did it grab me, but it kept me sleepless. I couldn't sleep at night because I kept thinking there are so many different ways to express an idea that was going through an artist's head.
Who were the big influences on your art career in those days?
In the Worcester community, the only one I could think of is Mary Murphy. Mary Murphy was the most amazing, empathetic, and highly skilled artist I've ever encountered today, even to today. She would take a piece of charcoal and go to the board. The model, of course, would be stationed on a platform in a chair or standing or whatever. And with just a few flashes of her charcoal, she would create this standing figure. And I would just gasp.
In awe.
In awe.
Yes.
So after high school,
so she was a teacher at the Worcester Art Museum.
She was a teacher at the Worcester Art Museum.
And you studied there full-time for a while?
I studied there full-time for 1 year after I graduated from high school.
And then what happened? Tell me.
And then I got married. And I was not able to access a scholarship that was offered to me.
Because you were Sadie, the married lady.
Right, right, absolutely.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So then you
So
began...
then I married, and my husband was a returning serviceman from the Second World War, and he was going to Springfield College to do group work and community organization. And so as a newlywed, a 20-year-old young woman, we married and we settled in Springfield, Massachusetts, in a boarding house where we lived in one room with 4 other boarders.
You know, I think it's hard for people to imagine how different attitudes and ideas were. Mm-hmm. You can't imagine it if you weren't there.
Right.
It was a different period of time. You expected to get married, and if you weren't married by the time you were 20,
that's
you
right.
were starting to get nervous, or your parents were.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I married before my next oldest sister, and she was hell-bent on finding somebody.
It was
right
disaster.
away.
Exactly.
Right.
I remember I got married when I was in college also. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was it, so your first experiences, what was your first show? When did you first begin exhibiting?
Well, the first show occurred in 1952. I'd been reading, I don't even know how I got across the information. I'm assuming that I was reading something in the New York Times or the Boston Globe about an open competition. And this was going to take place, the show was called the Festival of Arts, and it was taking place in Laguna Beach, California.
That was your first show?
That was my first show. I didn't have a show there.
The first show you participated in.
Right, absolutely.
You know what strikes me as interesting in that is that you were reading those papers and that you were looking for opportunities. In other words, you were thinking big.
You
were thinking outside your known world.
Yeah.
Which is important, and I think a characteristic of you.
Well, I think if you're interested in something, you have to keep finding an opportunity. I mean, you can't expect people to come knocking on your door and saying, "Would you like to show your work?"
You can't.
I know you're being facetious, but so many people believe that, you know. And then, of course, in the meantime, though, I had been showing on snow fences. What group did I belong to? The Worcester County. It was some little local arts group
that exhibited together.
And we would all take our paintings to Institute Park down the street from here.
And is that where you sold your first painting?
No, the first painting was the one in Laguna Beach, California.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
The first show I entered, and the first time I ever sold a painting.
And you actually sold.
Yeah.
That must have been a big encouragement.
It was very exciting.
It must have been a thrill, really.
Imagine $150 in 1952. Think about that.
I can imagine it, because I remember selling a piece for $100 and thinking, this was it, my life was set.
Right.
How funny.
So, you know, and then from Springfield, and don't forget, while I was in Springfield, I was taking lessons also at the Springfield Art Museum and spending hours and hours and hours at a time in the Springfield Museum of Fine Art. Engaging with the art.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you returned to Worcester, and you eventually went and got your degrees.
Right. I returned to Worcester. And years went by where I never thought about another education. Why? Because I was very busy learning how to be a sign painter. And
would you believe I was a sign painter
too? Were you really?
Yes, I lettered trucks, I did all kinds of
lettering. And did you go up on the ladders and go up in billboards?
Absolutely. No, I didn't do billboards.
That was so exciting. Well, that was how the guy gave me my first job. He said, if you can climb the ladder, get up here on the billboard with us,
that was
we'll
real
give
money.
You the job.
In those days, that was real money.
35 cents an hour.
I made better money doing that than other things.
Yeah, but you were in another era.
Maybe.
You know, we're talking 1948.
So you went back to school and got your MFA.
The MFA was at the encouragement of a very dear friend, now gone. Her name was Ira Segan. Mm-hmm. And she was interested in going back to school herself. She wanted to get a degree. And she encouraged me to go back to UMass. through the University Without Walls program.
And that enabled you to get the job teaching in Framingham?
Absolutely.
And then a little bit later, in what year did you start teaching at the...
at Holy Cross College, 1978.
And how many years were you there?
15 years.
And you were the head of the visual arts department
just for a year.
And Holy Cross actually gave you a wonderful retrospective when you
That's
when
right.
you retired
After I left,
from there.
After I left, and that came as a really wonderful surprise. I had no idea that that was in the offing at all.
I remember that show, and the catalog for that show is marvelous. And so let's see. Then you had another adventure, and that whole wonderful era when the Terri Priest Gallery, which was in this building.
It was in this building.
In this room, as a matter of fact.
As a matter of fact. It didn't look like this back then, though.
It was a wonderful gallery, and I have to say that it set a certain tone and gave a lot of opportunities for artists in the community, because there was a serious art gallery in the Worcester community.
Susan, I was bringing artists that the Worcester community would never have seen otherwise, unless they went to New York. I was bringing artists here from California, from San Francisco, from Chicago. I mean, we were showing works by John Baldessari.
Sure, I remember that.
I mean, these were big guys and big women.
It was a wonderful, it reminded me of the Woody Allaire days when there was a focus and a place to go to see art and talk about art. And
absolutely.
The openings were always mobbed, and the art was always good, and it was a wonderful
And the food
era.
Was great.
It was a wonderful era. Well, this is a piece that I recognize from being probably from the 60s when you were doing the Stripe series. What was the name of that series?
Organic Interaction. And the title was deliberate, Organic Interaction, because when you look at these paintings, your eyes begin to see multicolors. It's a natural process that happens. In each case, when I would do a painting using the black and white stripes like this, there would always be equal number of white stripes and equal number of black stripes. And together, those equal numbers would create a sort of moire effect. And you could begin to pick up colors like yellows and magentas and sky blues and greens. And the purpose
I can see it, I can really see it.
Yeah. And the purpose was, I was deeply involved in the civil rights movement, deeply involved. In the marches, in the protests, in the letter writing, and even to the extent where there were people who threw steel pipes through our front window.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Also, it was a kind of a split situation because my husband was not as committed to what I was doing as I was. And so there was a lot of tension going on at that time. But I have always been convinced that no one is better than I am, but I, in turn, am no better than anybody else. That's how I've lived my life, all my life. And I felt that in those days, African Americans were being denied all their rights in some areas of this country. And not only were they being denied their rights, but they were also being accused of crimes and misdemeanors that they were not the person who was the person at risk. And so I spent probably up until the late 1960s, maybe 1967, 68, when the focus of my work was black and white paintings. So a total of 13 years from the time I started until they then moved down to this series, which is called Static Variations. And these three-dimensional things were very unique at the time for me. And I would work with a carpenter and tell him what I wanted to try to impress. But I was still using the same system of simple shapes, simple colors. I wasn't trying to create an emotional reaction other than the viewer looking at this and the various optical situations that were occurred.
So even though you were sort of part of the optical art movement, the interesting thing for me is that the work was always content. driven,
Absolutely.
content driven.
And when people would say to me, that reminds me of, there was a woman who started all of this, Barbara Riley, or
Bridget
Riley. I didn't even know who she was. I didn't know who she was until one of my paintings from this series was accepted into a show in New York City and was shown in the U.S. art competition. It was a 3-pronged competition. And I went to that opening and then went to museums after the opening was over, and there was a Bridget Riley.
And you realized that others were doing it as well.
Right, but she was doing it with the intention of creating
optical illusions.
That was never my intention.
Yes.
My intention was strictly these
But there is a
lines.
strong optical illusion
Right,
there because
strong.
of the way you feel space there, and
That's
that
right.
kind of you have to adjust to or reconsider how you're reading the space.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's a really wonderful piece. I love the simplicity of it. I wish it could be more simple.
Well, I mean, we all have our style. We all have our. See, everything that I've ever done as a painter has come out of some life experience of mine, either because of limitations of material, limitations of resources, limitations of time. I mean,
Yes.
I was always time constrained.
How did you ever manage to be an artist with such full focus and intensity while raising a family and teaching and running a gallery?
Well, because I'd be down here at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning after the dishes were done and after the food was made and everything else. We all have
Where
these.
there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
Now, this is an example of another series that you did. Was that just called the Angel series?
I don't think I called it a series. I think these paintings, of which I stayed with them for a very short period of time, these were a direct result of the death of my sister Emma. Emma took over after my mother died, and she was our sort of surrogate mother. And she was unfortunately diagnosed with pancreatic cancer much too late. And the progression of her pancreatic cancer was quite sudden, and she died very soon. And I was very angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at the doctors. I was angry at everybody because it was so totally unexpected and it was never diagnosed. And for me, I'm a religious person in the sense that I believe in God. I believe that there is an afterlife. That's how I am. And so I had to struggle to find a way to say, help me through this anger, and it was the angels that came to my aid. And then I'm always interested in art history, so that's where the 2 little cherubs come from. So all the angel paintings that I did in that period were a direct result of my trying to come over the grief of my sister.
I'm interested that you said it was also from art history, because I know that studying of paintings and your close connection to the art of the past has always been something that kept nourishing you.
Oh, absolutely.
Kept nourishing you.
Absolutely.
Well, let's look at some others. This is wonderful. And now we're really seeing work that is in the series that you're still involved with.
That's right.
And again, this Vermeer series has been occupying you for quite a while.
Since 1998, actually.
1998.
Since 1998.
Did you see that show of the Vermeers?
I got all the way to Washington, and guess what? The government had closed the museum down.
Well,
so I never got to see that show. I got back on the train the following day, and I came back to Worcester.
Is Vermeer one of your favorite artists?
Very much.
Why?
Well, again, that first excitement that I had when I went to the Worcester Art Museum, there were slides. Back in those days, they were all purple. But one of the slides that Mary Murphy had shown us was a Vermeer painting. I don't recall which one it was, but I remember thinking how beautifully organized that painting was. I can't remember the painting, but I remember saying to myself, how did he know where to put that person? How did he know how to put the arrangements of objects around that person? It was all mystery to me.
There's such a wonderful unity and stillness.
Oh, absolutely.
For being Baroque, in the Baroque era, the work has such a tranquility and an eternity about it. Don't you think?
Well, sometimes I wonder whether it was his personal life. he was escaping from his multiple children into this little area in his house, and he had the model there. We don't know who these models are, by the way. No one knows for certain who the models are. They could have been his daughters. They could have been a maidservant that was dressed. All of the clothing that he has on his figures are borrowed clothing. What I want to point out, however, about the Vermeers and why I'm still using them even 10 years later is there's something about the magic of looking at a Vermeer and saying to me, as someone who's always been obsessed with perfection, that there was perfection here, but there was also emotion. There was also that tactile quality that you want to run your hands over some of these materials.
And how the genius, an artist who is a genius, has that ability to make elements like lines and shapes and colors communicate things like emotion and states of being and concepts of eternity, and it's magic.
Well, for instance, here are two women, and this woman, when you
and by the way, these, for those of you who aren't familiar with the paintings, these are from different paintings.
Two different
this is not a copy.
Two different Vermeer paintings, all right? This one is the guitarist, but she always made me laugh. Every time I looked at her face, because she looks like she's fresh. She looks like she's playing games. That look in her eye. And I try to replicate these to the closest ability that I have. They're replicated.
But there's also a conversation happening here. This is your new series, right?
And my conversation with these two is she's being very, she's being very serious and organized about the way she's playing the harpsichord, and she's sort of looking at her, but there's kind of a little look in her eye that says, and I'm having such a good time and you're being so serious. So it's that kind of a thing that excites me about looking at some of his characters.
Their individuality.
Yeah.
And in this piece, it's really more evident to see how you're playing around with art history in a very postmodern way. Sort of appropriating images. Well, not so much in this, you're using a landscape.
I'm using a landscape.
But combining things from art history with present day things and sort of using them in much more intellectual ways, shall we say.
Well, part of it is I'm still having fun. I mean, the whole use of the Vermeer women is to give me some joy and excitement, and also to challenge me. And I've done her head.
The girl with the pearl earring.
I've done her 11 times. And each time I've done her better and better. She's looking more like a real Vermeer. I have to watch out. And the Hollywood thing is, what better way to place a Vermeer woman in a contemporary landscape?
Yes.
Doesn't she look like she could be in a movie?
You know what, we never really got to the whole thing about what you're saying with these Vermeer women and how you're opening doors for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. My first show was called Vermeer Women Making Choices, if you recall. That was at Clark University.
So you're taking these figures and putting them in contemporary context.
Absolutely.
Juxtaposing them with contemporary paintings.
That's right.
And giving them a whole new lease on life and a whole new experience of the world.
But it also enables those who are so tired of looking at just old master paintings, they're seeing them in a different light.
Yes.
So I'm giving her an opportunity, and I'm giving Hollywood an opportunity.
Yes.
So I feel that she's on her way to Hollywood.
They're great.
She's already
been there anyway. Wonderful
yeah.
series.
Yeah.
I enjoy it each time, and you're doing new things with it too, which is very exciting. Yeah. I think we just have time for, I wanted to ask you, can you say what being an artist has meant to you for your life? I mean,
it's given me an opportunity to move away from the real world for many hours during the day, which can be very bothersome for someone like myself who gets too involved in the world and its sadnesses. So I find that being in my studio is healthy for me. I have major degenerative arthritis, but when I'm down here in my studio and I'm painting, I don't feel a thing.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
And also, I like the joy that some of these paintings are giving to some people. I mean, I have been very fortunate, and a lot of people respond to them.
Well, how would you define success for an artist?
Success is very personal. If artists think success is how many paintings you sell, they're going to be very disappointed in life. If artists thinks that you're going to have a museum show tomorrow, they're going to be very disappointed in life. You have to first be happy with what you do.
You have to love doing it.
You have to love doing it. You have to love doing it, but you also have to make an active effort on your part. You do have to take the pictures, and now I understand slides are out, and I'm so technology vacant, I don't know all of that, so I have to count on somebody else to come and take pictures and do websites and all of that, but you have to keep pushing your work out there.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I would encourage artists to just keep on doing it. Just keep on doing it.
Well, that was part of my definition, is if you're still doing it after all these years, that's success in my book, because that means it's still fulfilling you.
Absolutely.
And if you can find a way to do it, that's success.
Absolutely.
And
I'm looking forward to my show. I'm having a show in next year sometime.
Where is that going to be?
It's going to be at the Fitchburg State College in their new art gallery.
Good.
I just got the phone call the other day.
Well, we'll have to keep our eye out for that. Thanks so much for having us, Terri.
Thank you.
It was a great pleasure and an honor to be here
Thank
and
you.
talk
Thank
with you.
you.